Hello to all my viewers. How was your week? I hope all is going well. Well, I'm here to bring you the second chapter of What If Naruto Was from the Uchiha clan. Remember that I'll be uploading this fanfic little by little since it's my own creation, and that the first chapter is on my channel. Without further ado, I'll let you enjoy it.
In the center of the village, hidden in the leaves, stood the Hokage's tower proudly in front of a mountain with the faces of 4 legendary shinobi were carved. The first face was the face of the Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju, who with the work of the clans in the area banded together during the time of the warring clans to create the village of Hidden Leaves. Key amongst these clans was the Uchiha clan and their most powerful member Madara Uchiha. These two powerful shinobi were opposites in almost every facet of the word, but it was those differences that created an eternal rivalry that spread into the two clans. All of that tension came to a head in one final clash between Madara and Hashirama in a place now known as the Valley of the End, which cost the legendary Uchiha his life. Sometime after that battle, which rocked the shinobi world down to its core, Hashirama chose his successor for the position of Hokage. Hashirama chose his brother Tobirama Senju to be his successor for the mantle of Hokage. Tobirama too had grown up with Hashirama and Madara in the warring clans period, and due to numerous conflicts and his own personality never was able to trust an Uchiha. It was this lack of trust that created many domestic problems between the Hidden Leaf and the Uchiha. In an effort to appease the Uchiha, Tobirama had founded a police force in Konoha and left it to the Uchiha in a way to keep their power in check. Tobirama met his end during the First Shinobi World War, where he sacrificed himself fighting Kumo's Kinkaku force. On that team that Tobirama sacrificed himself to protect and entrust the future to was a young Hiruzen Sarutobi. Hiruzen was Tobirama's prized pupil and a ninja of extraordinary caliber. It was for these very reasons that Tobirama named Hiruzen the third Hokage just before his death. Under Hiruzen's watchful eye, the Hidden Leaf was guided through 2 more world wars, and its Hokage grew in fame with the village itself. As Hiruzen's skills continued to advance, he had become known as the God of Shinobi, a title that had not been used since Hashirama Senju's time. Hiruzen teaching abilities were world-class. Hiruzen taught 3 powerful shinobi how to be shinobi, and these 3 were Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, who later became known as the Sannin for their exceptional skills. Taking the losses of the Third Shinobi World War onto his shoulders, Hiruzen decided to atone for that mistake by stepping down, much to the village advisor's disagreement. Hiruzen named Minato Namikaze, a pupil of his student Jiraiya, as the 4th Hokage due to his strong will of fire, a belief Hiruzen held in high regard. Minato had made his name in the war by eliminating scores of Iwagakure shinobi with just the Hiraishin and Rasengan. The effects of the Hiraishin earned the man the moniker of the Kiroi Senko, which was all the enemy saw before their life was no more. It was not only his power that earned him the title of Hokage, but also his infectious personality that drew people to his powerful presence. It was this man who was sitting in the seat of the Hokage behind a desk in his office with his eyes shut in a contemplative silence. Minato appeared to be a tall, fair-skinned man who did have bright, blue eyes and spiky, sunshine blonde hair. Minato had jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face. His daily attire consisted of a standard Konoha nin uniform with 2 thin bands each on both of his sleeves, a leaf green flak jacket, blue forehead protector, and blue sandals on his feet. He had also taken to wearing a long, white haori over his leaf uniform that had an orange flame pattern around the base of it. Minato was lost in thought, ignoring the ever-growing mountain of paperwork that was gathering upon his desk. It was the day that almost destroyed his entire family in a matter of moments. He learned in that day just what it meant to feel pain for something that was out of his control. All he could do was send out the village's best tracker units to search for him. He couldn't even ask other nations for help because of the implications it would have not only on Konoha but Naruto. What was odd was that the sky didn't show any signs of darkness. In fact, it was a bright and sunny day, almost as if it was glad to illuminate what they saw. That was 5 years ago. Flashback. Minato and Kushina were left speechless at what they were just told, because if it was true, then it just turned their whole world on its axis. Minato was left to stare at his sensei, Jiraiya, with a mix of disbelief and worry, but just couldn't find his voice. Kushina, on the other hand, was livid. Her hair was swaying like the Kyuubi's 9 tails. The reason was that her hair was resonating with the tremendous amount of anger welling up inside of her body. "Can you repeat that, Jiraiya?" I am not exactly sure I heard you correctly the first time. Jiraiya took a deep breath and with a serious face repeated himself, not quite believing what he was about to say either. I said that the prophecy has changed. It now says he with the vision shall recreate the world as he sees fit with either peace or chaos. It was only a few days ago that he was summoned to Mount Myobokuzen by the two-toed elders. When he questioned them on why he was so suddenly taken away from his research, he was whacked over the head by both Fukasaku and Shima. After that, they had taken him to the Grand Elder where he told them about the new prophecy. Sensei, you must be kidding. We did all we did because you assured us that either Naomi-chan or Narumi-chan was the child of prophecy. Now you are telling us it might be Naruto. Minato was slightly worried because he was aware of how little they interacted with their son, but they needed to make sure that Narumi or Naomi were prepared for what would be pushed on their young shoulders. Minato was also glad since this would give him time to spend with his eldest child, his son, and help him grow into a great shinobi but also a great man like the Naruto in Jiraiya's first novel. I am not joking with you, Minato. I believe that they are speaking of Naruto in the prophecy, so with that in mind, is Naruto here at the moment? Jiraiya asked the two parents because if he was then they could start the training now. Now that Jiraiya thought about it, he didn't recall spending any time with his godson, and that actually bothered him. There was no way he was too indulged in the prophecy that he would ignore Naruto was there. If only he knew how wrong he was earlier in time instead of now a month after the three Namikaze's birthday, but it was far too late. Kushina was about to respond, but that was cut off when the door to the room they were in slammed open, and an excited Naomi ran in followed by a more calm Narumi. Tuchan. Ka-chan, can we start training today, pretty please? Naomi all but begged her mother and father, ignoring the toad sage, causing him to mumble about disrespectful brats. Kushina looked to Minato, silently asking for an answer to the question posed to them. Minato nodded since this would be a good way to train all of their children, and he really wanted to see what Naruto was capable of. Yes, we will all be training together today since you will be starting the academy soon. We can't have those other clan's children get too far ahead, right? Will you be helping Jiraiya? Kushina asked, ignoring Naomi's excited shout of yes, in favor of staring down the toad sage, telling him he better say yes or else. While Jiraiya struggled to manage a coherent response, Narumi raised an eyebrow at the fact that Kushina used the word all. Did that mean they were going to include her brother? She really hoped so, because the last time she heard her brother's name was when that man with the sword was talking at their birthday. Does that mean that Naruto-kun is going to train with us this time? Narumi tried to hide the hopeful tone in her voice, but she really wanted to spend time with her elder brother. She let a large smile cross her face when she saw both Kushina and Minato nod their heads yes. Naomi was ecstatic that she would get to train with her Nisan. For some reason, when she didn't see Naruto at the part, she wanted to train with him or at least talk to him. Anything she was about to say was cut off when there was a poof of smoke in Jiraiya's arms, revealing the toad contract. Well, let's go see Naruto, so we can get down to business and start shaping you three into feared shinobi. Jiraiya exclaimed in a childish tone that got 3 giggles from the girls and a shake of the head from Minato, who had a fond smile on his face. The group of 5 each made their way to Naruto's door with their own thoughts, each revolving around Naruto and each being hopeful about the encounter upcoming. Making it there, Minato was about to open the door when his hand froze the moment he came to a realization. I don't ever remember coming in here before. That can't be a good thing. Pushing back his apprehension, Minato opened the door and the 5 people entered the room. The group simply stared at the room in a mixture of shock and disbelief, even though the room had very little to stare at. Minato and Kushina looked around at the bare room that was just barely adequate for a human being to live in. Jiraiya noticed the thick dust that seemed to settle in every corner of the room, telling him no one had been here in quite a while. Narumi and Naomi were comparing this room to theirs and suddenly felt very guilty about how their brother had to live. That was when everyone had the same exact thought, although unwillingly. Naruto is not here. Minato was the first to break from the trance everyone found themselves in at the sight of his son's room. His eyes spotted an envelope sitting on top of the dusty desk. Being curious of what it could be, he sat down in the chair and opened the letter, hoping for answers. His eyes slowly grew wider the more he read Naruto's letter. That is when he realized just how bad of a father he had been. No! Minato whispered as he read the last few paragraphs, though it was easily heard through the dead silent room. Minato's voice drew everyone over to him, and they each began to read the letter over his shoulder. Kushina brought a hand up to her mouth to try and cover the horrified gasp that threatened to escape from her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she continued to read on, wishing she could stop, and as she went on she questioned how she could call herself a mother. Jiraiya was so shocked that he dropped the Toad contract as he read the letter 3 times over just to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Naomi and Narumi were openly crying and silently speaking their brother's name. That was when the note started to break at the corners as Minato unknowingly started channeling his wind chakra in anger. Naruto's not told of all the beatings he would receive from the villagers on his birthday and how they would call him the Demon Child or Kyuubi. Naruto told them how he would often end up at the hospital for weeks on end as he recovered only to be visited by Hiruzen or Mikoto while they didn't show up once. He even told them how some of the beatings went where they ranged from having his nails pulled out to stabbings and bashings. And Naruto survived because the conscious had a small amount of chakra and would heal him while unconscious. Naruto then told of how the ANBU who would watch him as they did all of the Hokage's kids would only stop the fox hunters when they were moments from killing him, which left him on the Shinigami's doorstep. He told them how the only ANBU who would prevent the beatings were Weasel and Nico. The only reason the room wasn't flooded with enough killer intent for the whole village to feel was because of the children's presence. Then came the last paragraph of the letter, which broke the hearts of each of the family members. It told them that Naruto had left of his own accord to find somewhere safe for him to live, and he was not sure if he would ever come back to the place he called a hellhole. How could this happen? How can I call myself a mother? Kushina asked, openly sobbing as she thought about what Naruto had gone through. Minato quickly stood up and wrapped his wife in a hug as she sobbed in his chest. Minato too questioned how he could call himself a father when a father was supposed to protect his child, something he didn't do. Narumi and Naomi were embracing each other, crying their eyes out as Jiraiya tried and failed to calm them down. It was official, this was the worst day of the Namikaze Uzumaki's lives, yet the sun continued to shine. Shining for Naruto's liberation. Flashback end. Minato was broken from his thoughts when he heard a knock on the door to the Hokage's office. "Come in," Minato ordered, watching the door open and his wife, daughters, student, and Sasuke and Sakura enter the room. Kushina gave her husband a bright smile, one mimicked by Naomi and Narumi, though to a lesser degree. Kakashi gave his sensei his usual eye smile, while reaching for his Aika book, which was penned by Minato's sensei Jiraiya. "Mission report?" Minato asked, even though it was a command and he already knew the results of the mission since it was nothing more than menial labor. I don't see how cleaning a training ground is a mission," Sasuke said aloud, crossing his arms and closing his eyes, though Minato ignored the arrogant Uchiha in favor of looking at Kushina and Kakashi. Actually, it seems that the only one who responded to Sasuke was Sakura, who said, "So cool," practically drooling over the Uchiha. Kushina and Kakashi both nodded, telling their Hokage that the mission was successful and there were no complications. Minato was about to reach for the D mission folder and Naomi caught this. She couldn't handle taking another D rank mission, that and Sasuke's infinite arrogance was literally driving her insane. "Tsunade, can you please give us a C rank mission? I just can't take these chores anymore." Minato saw that each of the genin gave small nods, agreeing with his daughter's words, well aside from Sakura, who looked unsure about the idea. Minato saw Kushina and Kakashi nod their heads, believing they were ready for the slight upgrade to their workload. Letting out a sigh, Minato grabbed the C mission folder and skimmed through it before pulling out a request and handing it to Kushina, who stepped up to accept the details. "Your mission is to escort a bridge builder from the land of waves back home and protect him as he builds the bridge connecting the island to the mainland. You will meet your client in 2 hours in front of the main gates." Dismissed. Naomi whooped in joy and quickly took Narumi by the hand and led them off, with Kushina following, laughing at her daughters. Kakashi quickly left in a shunshin the minute the word dismissed was said, leaving Sasuke to walk with his fangirl hot on his heels. Minato let out a sigh and wondered if he had any normal shinobi in his service. As if on cue, he heard shouts of youth from behind the doors. A figure wrapped in a gray cloak was walking calmly through a path leading to the village hidden in the leaves. The figure wondered why there would be a path that would lead into a village that was supposed to be hidden. Just as quick as the question came, so did an answer, and that answer was arrogance. Over the years, Konoha has become incredibly powerful with the Yellow Flash, god of shinobi, Two of the Sannin and shinobi such as Kakashi and Guy, they became the most powerful village. Titles like such often led to overblown egos, and Konoha was no exception. Why am I coming back to this place? Then images of a few people flooded the figure's mind, along with iconic places such as the Hokage Monument and Tower, along with the business district, came to thought. Right, I wish for the village to stand despite its unsavory characters. I sound like Madara did before he fled from the village. I guess he and I are more alike than I thought. Naruto thought with an amused smirk as his eyes flashed red under the hood he had covering his face from peering eyes. Naruto may have had no love for its people, but Konoha was still his home, and he would not let the likes of Kumo or Iwa try and destroy it. Itachi-sensei must be getting into my mind more than I like? But is that a bad thing? Naruto asked himself. Since leaving all those years ago, Naruto learned many things from Mihawk and Itachi. His favorite was that stoic appearance. It was like second nature now to Naruto, and he quite liked it that way. Now people couldn't read him well aside from his senseis. Seeing the large gates of Konoha passing by him as he walked, Naruto let his 3 Tomo Sharingan fade, leaving cold blue eyes hidden by the shadow of his hood. Naruto decided he would keep his Uchiha blood secret until he determined that it was the right time to reveal it. Naruto caught sight of something that made Naruto wonder if Kami herself just loved to see how much she could make him miserable. Coming his way was Team 7 with Naomi and Narumi talking with each other, clearly excited about something. Naruto then recognized Itachi's younger brother being followed by a fangirl while brooding. Bringing up the rear was Kakashi and his so-called mother. Naruto didn't even flinch as he walked by Sasuke, who he was a few inches taller than thanks to a growth spurt due to Mihawk's dieting. Or at least he tried to walk by him, because at the last moment the Uchiha bumped into Naruto's shoulder. "Watch where you are going, you loser!" Sasuke exclaimed as he turned around to glare at the unknown figure's back. Sasuke's angry shout stopped the rest of Team 7, who were now looking between the man in gray and Sasuke, wondering what they should do. Naruto just kept on walking. He had more important things to do than play with a spoiled child. "Hey, didn't you hear me?" Sasuke demanded, obviously not ready to let the issue drop. Kakashi was about to intervene to stop his new student from doing anything stupid. Sasuke acted first, though, caught up to Naruto's retreating form. Sasuke planned on teaching whoever it was under that cloak that they do not disrespect an Uchiha. With that, he gripped Naruto's shoulder, stopping his movement. "Looks like you need to be taught a lesson, idiot," Sasuke said rather arrogantly while smirking at the back of Naruto's head. Years of abuse made Naruto really dislike any form of contact that Naruto did not allow, and Sasuke was about to learn that the hard way. In an instant, Naruto had gripped Sasuke's wrist and flipped him over his shoulder, driving him into the ground. Without so much as a glance back, Naruto continued to walk away, leaving Sasuke to seethe on the dirt road. Managing to scramble to his feet, Sasuke glared at Naruto with black eyes filled with hatred for the person he had just met. "That's it, no one disrespects an Uchiha like that. We are the strongest clan in history. I'll kill you." Sasuke bellowed out in anger and rushed at Naruto's back with his fist cocked back. Naruto, who heard the shout, didn't react until Sasuke was a few paces away. That was when Naruto spun around and nailed Sasuke in the chest with a powerful kick that sent him back to his team. Sasuke was saved by Kakashi, who caught him, sparing him any more pain from a hard landing he was sure to take. Team 7 was checking to see if Sasuke was alright. Naruto continued to walk away from them, continuing on as if the encounter never happened. "That was Itachi-sensei's brother? I am not very impressed, but I guess he did get him to accept hatred. You were lucky, Uchiha. Normally I would have killed you for that, but that would make me getting into the village next to impossible, since he is one of the 2 remaining Uchiha." Deciding to save time and get the meeting with quicker, Naruto vanished in a murder of crows, leaving only a black feather. Team 7 turned to look at where the figure in gray was standing, only to see that he was no longer there, and all that was left was a black feather. Kushina and Kakashi were staring at the oddly familiar feather with interest. Naomi and Narumi were wondering just who that was, because from height he seemed to be around their age. Tsunade was laughing at the brooding Uchiha for getting his ass kicked while wondering if he could hire the figure in gray. Sasuke thought he had scared him off, something Sakura verbalized, getting silent groans from everyone else. With the encounter with Naruto behind them, they left for Nami no Kuni with one thought. Who was that? Minato was discussing with his predecessor Hiruzen Sarutobi about recent events that happened in Kirigakure. Apparently a woman named Mei Terumi had united the bloodline users into a rebel army to fight Yagura the Yandere Mizukage who was exterminating the bloodline users. They had come to Konoha to ask for assistance 3 years ago, and after a long council meeting Minato had to inform Mei that the Leaf could not assist. It was the most recent news was what was unsettling to the Kage and former Kage. It appears that Mei was able to find most of Kiri's 7 ninja swordsmen, and that was the last report they had received. Both Hiruzen and Minato knew that if the rebels had won the war, then the Leaf had a potentially new enemy, which was something they did not need, seeing as IWA was still less than neutral to their presence. Having another potential relationship like Konoha did with IWA, with Kiri was something that Konoha couldn't afford. Even with Tsunade, if Konoha was to go to war, they would have to face IWA, then Kiri would no doubt assist, not to mention what the prideful Raikage would do. Even as strong as Konoha is, it could not withstand a multi-front war with 2 villages with a chance of a third. Any more discussion was interrupted by a murder of crows flocking together in the center of the Hokage's office. Hiruzen and Minato's eyes widened because they knew only one person who used crows, and that was Konoha's second most wanted criminal attaché, Uchiha. Konoha must have become very lax if I am able to enter the Hokage's office just like that. A calm voice came from under the gray cloak that stepped from the crows. Hiruzen and Minato were confused now since this was clearly not Itachi, but this also made them weary since they didn't notice the man until the crows suddenly burst into the room. Nico, while I appreciate what you have done for me earlier in life, it would be better for your health if you remove the sword from my neck. Naruto said calmly, but the threat was not missed by the shinobi in the room. His words were so calm it actually made the ANBU behind him, who was indeed Nico, flinch slightly. Naruto was about to react when the blade was not moved, but that was stopped when he saw his father suddenly get to his feet. Naruto could clearly see that he was not happy with what was happening right in front of your eyes. What is the meaning of this? Who sent you here? Minato demanded, his voice full of the authority that made him feared as a powerful shinobi. He was not happy that someone could so easily stroll into his village through the detection barrier, nonetheless show up right in front of his eyes. Naruto didn't even flinch at the tone of the powerful shinobi in front of him, since he knew all he needed to do was flick the hood of his cloak down. Naruto's face showed nothing but cold indifference as he stared down what could be called the most powerful man in the world. I guess you wouldn't recognize my voice. It has been 5 years since I have been here and much longer since we had any kind of conversation. Naruto mused as he reached up and pulled his hood off of his head. Minato fell back into his seat when he saw Naruto's face. It was more narrowed out than he remembered from when he was younger. His black hair had grown longer and had almost dropped over his right eye. His eyes that were once warm when looking at him now felt like small icebergs. It hurt his heart knowing that it was his negligence that caused his son to be like that. And Naruto, what are you doing here? Minato asked in shock at seeing the sight of his son, who he had not seen in 5 years. Minato always thought that if Naruto came back it would be because he was forced, not because he came here willingly. Naruto could see that Hiruzen was equally surprised considering his pipe was resting on the floor in front of his feet. Naruto couldn't see Nico's face, but there was a very small trembling in the blade that only he could see. As much as he enjoyed watching Minato going through emotional turmoil, he was growing tired of being in the man's presence. I came back to Konoha to become a shinobi, Naruto stated simply as he moved the blade of Yugao from the nape of his neck. In action, the purple-haired Anbu didn't fight. Naruto kept an impassive gaze as he watched Minato's face become hopeful. Naruto decided he would crush that hope right now before it grew any larger. I chose Konoha because it was the most logical option, seeing as Kumo would try to experiment on my body to see if I had a Kekii Genkai because of your actions. IWA would certainly kill me the moment they found of our relation, even if it is only because of blood. I do not know enough about Kiri to make an informed decision because of their foolish war. Suna would just hand me back to you because of the alliance and their own lack of power to hold me. Do not think that I came here because of any other reason than that it was the most logical. Naruto finished his reasoning coolly, making Minato's face drop in sadness. Hiruzen, seeing that the younger Kage was in no shape to respond, decided to intervene on his behalf. While I am glad you are back, I would like to know where you think you should be classified as? Hiruzen asked, trying to fish information on the enigma known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto was smiling inwardly at the man who was like a grandfather to him, but he still would not let anything out unless he deemed it necessary. Turning his head, Naruto kept an impassive look on his face, but Hiruzen could see the smallest spark of warmth in there that widened the smile already on his face. I believe I should be ranked as a genin like all those my age, Naruto stated simply as he looked at Hiruzen, then to Minato, who had regained himself. He could see the confusion on their faces, no doubt expecting him to try and boast. Naruto called them foolish silently for such thinking. Information could lead to any shinobi's death, and he was by no means an exception. I have not been trained in this village, so promoting me to anything else would create animosity between myself and the other shinobi. Or they will see it as Minato giving me a promotion and not myself earning it. Naruto clarified his reasoning, managing to do it without admitting he was related to the Namikes. Minato was saddened that Naruto refused to call him father, but if half of what that letter said was true, he had no right to ask Naruto to do so. Getting Naruto to be a shinobi wouldn't be too hard considering he was his son, and hopefully this could be the start to trying to build a relationship. That can be managed, Naruto, but I need to ask you to take part in a spar, so I can see your capabilities. This is my one requirement, Minato stated firmly as he watched Naruto's hand reach behind his back, where took note of the handle that was covered by a guard and hand a small charm hanging from it. That is acceptable, Naruto said, simply standing there with his arms crossed over his chest and an impassive gaze. Naruto had already assumed he would need to do something along those lines to gain entrance into the village. Knowing that his opponent would most likely be a jounin, he revealed his crows and he would show his kenjutsu prowess. Before that, do you know of any apartments available at the moment? Naruto inquired, not once breaking from that calm, almost condescending tone of voice. Minato was about to protest the decision and state that his son should live in the Namikaze compound. Naruto cut off the predictable response with a raised hand. Since I am to be a shinobi, I also am considered an adult and you have no right to decide where I live. My question remains. Minato silently cursed those long-standing rules since he knew Naruto was right about that and there was nothing he could do. I believe there is an empty floor in a complex in the red light district, Minato said, evenly trying to see how Naruto would react to living in such a shady place. Minato sighed when Naruto didn't even raise an eyebrow to the information presented to him. I believe Nico here can escort you to the building since Hiruzen-san and I have business we need to discuss privately. Naruto, report to Training Ground 7 in 5 hours for your test. Naruto didn't even nod his head. He turned to Yugao and looked at her expectantly for a few moments before she realized he was ready to go. With that, the two shinobi left the room. Yugao and Naruto had been walking in what was an awkward silence for Yugao since she had quite a few questions for Naruto. It had been years since she had seen him as a young boy, and no, here he was completely different. She was only 14 during that time, so the ANBU had her watch over the village pariah. She wanted to know where he went for so long and just how much he changed. How are you, Naruto? She finally managed to say something and cursed herself for something so stupid. It only got worse when she saw Naruto's eyebrow rise when she asked her question. I am well, Naruto replied, clearly not interested in putting too much effort into the conversation. Yugao half expected that kind of answer if Naruto's interaction with the Hokage was any indication. Sparing a glance at her one-time charge, Yugao decided to try again to get Naruto to engage in a conversation. Why did you leave, Naruto? Yugao asked, more curious than anything else. After all, he was the Hokage's son. He could have had anything he wanted and he would have got it. Yugao was glad to see Naruto had not reacted negatively to her question. He actually kept walking with the same facial expression, making her wonder if he was even listening to her. I left Konoha to learn how to protect myself, Naruto answered, telling the truth since that was his reason. It was true that Itachi and Yugao did protect him when he was younger, but that was then. Now he could only rely on himself for protection, and to do that he needed to get stronger, which he did. Naruto had not fooled himself into believing that he was almighty. No, Naruto knew he still had much more growing to do. His eyes alone had much more potential than they were letting on. Naruto made sure he would make use of this potential to further his ambitions. The two were now firmly in the red light district and were seemingly oblivious to their surroundings. While Yugao was, because she was busy trying to figure out the new Naruto walking with her. Naruto was highly aware of the people around them going about their daily lives, but he chose to ignore them. Naruto knew that Yugao wanted to learn more about him, and decided to help her out in what would seem to be an indirect way. The Hokage will no doubt come to see my test. If anyone had a grudge against him, this would be the perfect time to act, no matter how foolish it would be to do so. Yugao turned her head to look at Naruto to see what he meant by those words, but his face gave away nothing. What did he mean by that? Could he be planning to attack Yondaime-sama? No, he knows that no one in this village would do so, not to mention Hokage-sama's power is only rivaled by Lord Third. Wait, he is telling me that I could watch over Hokage-sama as well as see his battle. Thank you, Naruto. That was when the two shinobi arrived at the door to Naruto's flat. Turning to face Yugao with his door to the back, Naruto looked into the slit eyes on the mask. Thank you, Yugao. Naruto thanked her before entering his new home. Yugao stood there in front of the door in shock, staring at nothing as she tried to make sense of what just happened. Not once during his time with the Hokage did he say thank you. And this new Naruto doesn't seem to say things just to say it. Yugao left in a leaf shunshin to return to her duty of guarding the Hokage, but there was a small smile on her facial features behind her mask. The time limit given had passed for Naruto to take his test, and still Naruto was sitting on the center training post in Training Ground 7. It was only a few hours from dusk, yet Naruto's body language only showed calm despite his opponent seeming to be late. Naruto decided to review his time back in Konoha, which was rather pleasant. No one bothered him inside of his new flat, even the ANBU, who were no doubt watching him, were keeping their wits to themselves. On his way to the training ground, he did not receive any glares. He even got a few smiles, mostly from children, but there were a few from some of the adults. Naruto knew he was only on the receiving end of those smiles because they did not know who he was. Naruto had shed his gray traveling cloak since he was now in the village. Underneath, he had a gray zip-up vest with a hood and short sleeves. The vest held an interesting design of 9 magatama around the neckline, and they were crimson in color. Naruto wore black ANBU pants with short boots that went up to his ankles. The reason for that was many times in battle Mihawk stepped on his toes, calling him an idiot for having such a glaring opening. His hands were clad with black fingerless gloves to protect his hands, a common practice for swordsmen. It seems that they are here, Naruto thought, since he could feel a chakra signature in the forest in front of him. He recognized the signature as Yugao's signature. He had become quite accustomed to it since she was the only person he had extensive exposure to. If Yugao is here, then the Yondaime and the old man are probably near her. No surprise I can't feel their signatures. They aren't Hokages for a reason. Naruto concluded as he continued to sit in a meditative position atop the training post. That was when a second chakra signature flared up in the woods behind him for a moment. That was when a fireball came from the same part of the woods that Naruto felt the chakra burst coming from. The fireball quickly engulfed Naruto's seated position and expanded slightly, swallowing up the entire training post. The ball of flames shrouded the poof of smoke that emerged when the fireball contacted Naruto. Each set of eyes in the premises were trained on the scorched post, where there were no sign of Naruto or even a training post. The real Naruto, who was sitting in the forest, stealthily made his way to a tree behind where his clone sitting and saw a shinobi sitting there crouched and focused on the field. "Yes, I am still here," Naruto whispered softly, making the shinobi in front of him tense, since he had not detected Naruto's presence. Before he was even able to react, Naruto kicked him from his perch and knocked him into the open training field, where he dropped down into soon after. Naruto saw that his opponent was a tall man with dark, spiky hair, and he was wearing red-rimmed sunglasses, which Naruto found useless considering the sun was going to go down soon. The man was wearing the standard leaf jounin garb with a leaf headband that was tilted to the left slightly. Naruto decided he would get straight to the point since he didn't feel like wasting any more of his time with this useless test. Naruto reached behind him and pulled out his blade that was hidden by his cloak earlier. The blade was a finely crafted katana with the handle wrapped in a black fabric that had diamonds cut into the fabric, showing the white handle underneath. The handle also had a handguard encompassing it on each side to prevent damaged hands. That also let the charm be clipped on to so it was resting on the back of his hands as he gripped the handle of his blade. The blade was made of chakra conductive metal, where the top of the blade was a jet black. The bottom of the blade was a snow-white color, and where they had met it was a shade of gray, much like the coat of a wolf. This was the blade known as Twilight, and it was a gift from both Mifune and Mihawk. Naruto watched with an impassive face as the wind blew his hood down, revealing his cold blue eyes to the special Jounin Aoba. That was when he saw Aoba pull free his own katana that was completely black from blade to the hilt. While intrigued by the black blade, Naruto moved to engage his opponent, bringing Twilight down in a slashing motion which was blocked by Aoba. Aoba tried to push back on Naruto but found that countered as Naruto let his katana slide lower on the black blade and forced it up. Planning on forcing his advantage, Naruto flipped Twilight horizontally and went to stab Aoba, but the sunglasses-wearing ninja was already out of his reach. Hokage-sama's son is very skilled with his blade. Perhaps I should have not challenged him with my own blade. Aoba rushed forward and re-engaged the younger raven-haired boy in another kenjutsu exchange. The two blades clashed with each other over and over, sparks showering from each point of contact. Both Aoba and Naruto knew that Naruto was getting the better of the exchange and was forcing Aoba back. When Aoba made a mistake in lunging too far, with one of his sword swipes, Naruto scored a hit by cutting Aoba across the right arm, making Aoba hiss in pain. Aoba jumped back and looked at Naruto for a moment to see what seemed to be a bored look on his face. Taking his actions as accommodating, Aoba glanced down to examine his new wound, and he was pleased to see that it was a light cut. It looks like I won't be able to best him in a kenjutsu duel, so why not add a bit on ninjutsu? He hasn't even performed a hand sign yet. Aoba observed, not believing that Naruto could do ninjutsu, but what he wasn't aware of was that Naruto just did not wish for that information to be revealed. Meanwhile, in the woods, standing and watching the fight were Hiruzen and Minato, with Yugao hiding in a tree near them, also watching Naruto's performance. Each of the three Konoha shinobi were amazed at Naruto's skill, especially Yugao, who specialized with a blade. Naruto-kun's skill with that katana is exceptional, Hiruzen commented with no small amount of pride in the young man in front of him. If he had to guess, Naruto's skill was high Chunin to low Jounin level. He wondered just who could have taught him such skills. The only people he could think of would have been the samurai of Tetsu no Kuni. Of course there was Kumo, but they would no doubt kill Naruto if he asked to be trained by them, since he was Minato's son. Yes, his sword skills are very well refined, though he hasn't shown any ninjutsu or genjutsu skills to accompany his kenjutsu. However, he is keeping Aoba in a close quarters combat scenario to prevent him from using his ninjutsu, while pressing his advantage in the field of kenjutsu. Minato concluded his analysis and could say that was at least a Chunin level of thought. Minato was sure that Naruto could be Chunin if he wanted to, because he could also see the way he carried himself was that of someone who had seen battle. Minato just wondered how much he had seen. Yugao was silently watching as Naruto skillfully countered each of his opponent's attacks and scored more than his share of glancing blows. She could tell Naruto was holding back, since it was nothing more than a spar. Amazing, he is doing all of this with just the base kenjutsu style. He has yet to use any techniques and he has a clear advantage, Yugao thought, watching as Naruto kept Aoba on the defensive. Yugao made a note to have a duel with Naruto when she had some off time to see just how skilled he was, because it was clear to her, an experienced swordswoman, that Naruto was holding back. Yes, Naruto-kun is very combat aware to keep Aoba from using whatever advantages he may have over him. He would make an excellent Chunin, but he seems to be content with being a genin. I guess that doesn't matter though, since the Chunin exams are coming up in a few months. Hiruzen replied with a small smile, since he couldn't wait to see who he considered to be a grandson excel like he knew he would. Hiruzen knew Naruto was hiding his skills from them. Even if it was to your own village, deception was still a shinobi's most powerful weapon. Yes, and we will be hosting these exams. Minato confirmed Hiruzen's statement with a nod of his head as his thoughts drifted to the Chunin exams. The blonde Kage wondered how many teams would be sent to Konoha from the other villages. It would make sense for them to showcase their shinobi to show they were stronger than the other villages' shinobi. He made note to expand the stadium they had built already to accommodate what he assumed would be one of the largest exams in history. Minato sighed softly when he imagined the paperwork he would have to do. There has to be some way to defeat the monster known as paperwork. Minato thought desperately. This kid is ridiculous. If this wasn't just a spar, I would have been dead many times over. I guess it wasn't wise to challenge him with a sword, since it has been a while since I used my black blade. Planting his hand in the dirt, Aoba used his leg to sweep Naruto's legs out from under him. Naruto reacted late and was clipped in the ankle, making him stumble midair, which Aoba used to his advantage by slamming a fist into his torso. There, that was the space I needed. Now I can use my jutsu. Aoba held a hand sign after going through a small chain of signs. Scattering thousand crows technique. Aoba pointed his finger and hundreds of crows flocked around Naruto, cawing and flapping their wings, covering Naruto's vision impaired with loose feathers. Naruto remained calm as he stared at the crows closely as Aoba continued to blind his younger opponent. This will make my black blade strikes next to impossible to see, let alone dodge. Aoba thought confidently as he tightened his grip on the black hilt of his black blade. Aoba paused momentarily as we watched Naruto remain stationary as he stared at his flock of crows. Why isn't he trying to escape or at least bat the crows away? Now it makes sense. These are not crows but blackbirds. Naruto stated plainly as he turned to where Aoba was last. He couldn't see Aoba, but if he could, he would see the shocked visage on his face. Naruto was curious as to why Aoba called them crows, since only Itachi and himself had signed the crow contract. Upon closer examination of these so-called crows, Naruto could see that they were actually smaller than a crow and had a colorful patch under their wings. Naruto could only assume he used the word crow to strike more fear into opponents, since crows were known to be scavengers. An interesting ploy indeed. I will show you crows. Naruto stated plainly, making a few hand signs with one hand, and crows started to emerge from his body and chased away the smaller black birds. That was the useful aspect of the crows. The smaller summons were actually murders of crows and not a singular one, and required small amounts of chakra to call. Naruto stood there calmly as his crows chased off the blackbirds, leaving black feathers to fall around him, leaving him in a ring of black feathers. Naruto stared impassively, his eyes devoid of emotion, as Aoba stared with wide eyes behind his sunglasses. No one had ever been able to see through that technique before. Naruto did just that, but also disabled it. I have had enough of this, Naruto stated to himself as he started to channel his chakra through twilight, but instead of glowing blue like the usual form chakra would take, it was gray with small flickers of red. He didn't want to reveal too much, but he needed to end this before he was forced to reveal a few more of his tricks. Naruto readied his hand, and with a single flourish of his hand, the chakra shot from the length of his blade and expanded out horizontally. Aoba, Minato, Hiruzen, and Yugao all were looking at the way of gray chakra with the small red flickers with surprise. That is the technique of the samurai. Kami no Ken no Mai. Severance from the material world. Naruto's technique went unheard to everyone else simply because he said it in a low whisper as to keep it away from their ears. Not that Aoba would have heard it anyways, as he was too busy trying to avoid the massive wave of chakra. Aoba's only option was to fall onto his back because he didn't even have time to drop on his hands and knees. That was what Naruto needed. Rushing forward, Naruto pointed twilight at Aoba's neck with the same cold, empty look in his cerulean eyes. Submit. Naruto said it wasn't even a demand, since he knew the shinobi was not foolish enough to say no. Aoba simply nodded his head, swallowing a lump in his throat. Nodding his head approvingly, Naruto removed his blade away and strapped it back onto his back and looked up. He saw Minato, Hiruzen, and Yugao each standing on a tree stump looking at Naruto. Those 3 trees were not the only ones cut clean through. The cut went through 10 trees in both directions, and at least 3 rose back into the forest. Naruto waited patiently as the observers walked forward and Minato dismissed Aoba. Naruto could see the pride in Minato's eyes, and he wondered how the man could feel any pride for someone he cast away like a piece of used paper. Naruto, what was that technique? Minato asked, hopefully being able to get Naruto to tell him something concrete. Naruto had not shown anything except crows and a skill with his katana, and he just needed to know more. Maybe all that time with Kushina and his daughters was starting to change his personality. Naruto let one of his eyebrows raise. Did he really expect Naruto to just give away his information? He may have hidden it with curiosity, but he was still fishing for information. Naruto's information. Naruto personally had no plans to share anything with this man. Especially this man. It was a chakra flow technique. Naruto stated what they all obviously saw. This way he was able to be vague and say he answered the question. Yugao watched as Naruto spoke with Hiruzen before going to Minato and receiving his leaf headband, which was placed on a black fabric. She was amazed by the cutting strength behind Naruto's attack and knew that he had his own style of kenjutsu. All of this only made her want to duel with the young shinobi even more than before. She briefly entertained the idea of asking Naruto about his style but killed that idea since this Naruto was much more guarded than the one from his childhood years. But maybe if she got to spend more time with him, then she could try to ask. Maybe not. I will take my leave now. Naruto stated simply when he received no disagreement. Naruto's body dissembled into a murder of crows, each cawing loudly as they flew away. The two Kage and one Anbu stood there in the field at dusk as a small wind blew across the field staring at the spot Naruto was occupying. Each went their own way, their duties for the day done with, and many differing things to think about. Some of these thoughts revolved around Naruto's return and some did not. All that was certain was that things were bound to get exciting in the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto was laying on his new bed inside of his new home and was simply staring at the ceiling, his blue eyes still containing that cold glimmer. Even though this new home was just as empty as his old room when he lived with the Namikazes, he felt much more at home. Naruto was resting with his hands folded behind his head and Twilight leaning on the bed, just in case one of those foolish villages tried anything against him. Naruto's eyes glanced at the door to his bedroom, but what he saw was all of the doors in his new home. I need to brush up on my Fuinjutsu, Naruto reminded himself since he had slacked off on his training in that art. The first step in my plan is complete. I now have a village to protect me from the other villages. Now all I need to do is grow here in Konoha while keeping an eye out for internal threats. Then once I have the power I desire, I will begin to exterminate these threats. For Konoha, Naruto said mentally before falling asleep, Itachi's influence showing clearly in Naruto's thoughts. Information, Kami no Ken no Mai, Divine Sword Dance. Naruto's Kenjutsu style created during his time in Tetsu no Kuni under the tutelage of Mihawk and Mifune, who made the sword to accommodate the style. The style uses the samurai saber technique as inspiration. Naruto uses his own chakra to manipulate the affects of his attacks, such as shape and spatial effects.